everybody. Welcome to Knox Makers. It's our Tuesday show and share. We do this every week, rain or shine, no matter if it's a holiday or a pandemic. We gather together and show off great things that we've made, or things that are not so great that we've made, or things that we've completely messed up. We still like to show them off. So I have a lovely list of people willing to come up here and do that tonight. We're going to start out with Timothy with another dulcimer in progress, I think.
So I'm not going to play this one for you. Not yet. There was some interesting comments and questions about the dulcimer I brought in last week. Was it last week? It's been a very long week. About which ones what I built and such. And so I thought I'd bring in Zoom Plus. I like Plus. That's good. So I thought I brought in some pictures and some notes of ones I've done earlier, and then kind of show you this latest project that I'm at. I have a history of playing and over-engineering these dulcimers. Usually hasn't really worked well. So I've played around with doing kind of complex struts through the middle there. I've played around with inlays and engineered, over-under designs, in these bracing inside. And for the most part, these have not worked that well. These two particular ones I've just taken apart. They were too thin, and they didn't have enough stability with the string pressure. There's probably 200 or 300 pounds of string pressure that's pulling the dulcimer together. But so they're some of these were quite a while back. December '87. I was kind enough to leave myself a little note. It's kind of like Timothy was here. Some of them were pretty. One of them had a nice little rose inlay that I did on that. It's a shame that they didn't work out very well. So this last attempt, or this most recent, I suppose, it won't be the last, I'm sure. I decided to see how kind of low effort I could make this. And so after last Tuesday's meeting, I went back to the scrap wood shelves, and I said, okay, here's my rule. I'm going to work with only stuff that I can find that's here on the scrap shelves. And so I found a bit of some old, it looks like this, I don't even know what it was for, this sideboard. I don't know if it's exterior or interior cosmetic or whatever. The sideboard that was there, I used that. Found a few oak strips that I used to make side end blocks on, and then the rest of it's just like plywood crap that I found back there that we'll see how that works. The top is actually the top was made out of some old drywall board, which is customarily a really awful soundboard material, but it does have some resonance, so we'll see how it goes. For hammer dulcimers, you don't want too much ring, because when you hit those strings, you don't want them to ring forever. You want them to stop on their own. There's no damper like a piano. So this is a work in progress. I've just gotten as far as, let's see if I can get that. Yeah, I've just gotten as far as, marking out where the pinholes are going to go. I'm going to go in the shop and drill some holes tonight, see how far I can go. So far, it's about 2 hours of effort. Scrounging through the pile was probably nearly half of that to find parts. That's what I got. Question? Yeah. Are
you actually attaching your soundboard?
Yeah, this is all entirely glued. Okay. So one massive chunk.
I've always seen them where the soundboard is floating.
Yeah. That's customary. Also customary to run the soundboard only up to the edge of the block, and with the soundboard inset inside the block. This is an old adopted from an old design. One of the first ones I built was this kind of method. It was rectangular, not trapezoidal. But it's a simple method of just slapping everything together and gluing it down. The traditional method doesn't glue the soundboard at all. It relies on the string pressure to hold everything down. Yeah, other questions? Yeah. Yeah, so this is partly feeling out how quick and dirty you can make something that is functional. Maybe it's not a great instrument, but it's functional. And I think once I work out what works easy-wise, I'm thinking of just calling it out, maybe a joint project. I don't know if we want to do that as a class per se, or just to kind of, hey, let's just meet on Saturday afternoon and slap some wood together and see what happens. Yeah.
I've had a lot of started projects, never finished over the years at cigar box.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
A lot of what you're talking about is stuff I never really learned, like how to even make the sound box work properly.
Uh-huh. Yeah, this is not, anything like, grand high acoustics or anything. This is just see what'll work. Yeah. Yeah, so I'll figure some things out. I'll post when I feel like I got something. I have a feeling there'll be some prices. We'll need the things you need to buy are piano wire and tuning pins. Those are the only things that I haven't been able to find just a scrap alternative for. But yeah, otherwise it's pretty cheap. Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Very nice. Thank you very much. Next up, we have Cynthia with some coasters.
This actually started off with a new sewing machine a couple of years ago that had a circle attachment. So you just stick the pin through it and it sews the circle all by itself.
That's super fancy.
Yeah, and that was the first one I tried here. And you can tell I put too thick of a batting in it, it buckled. I wasn't happy. So then I scaled it back and I made the other 4. And then I decided that they were a little boring. So I went and I made edging for them all. 3 of them, yeah. These 3 are crocheted edging straight onto the coasters. And the 2 on this side are tatting. But yeah, these 4, you can excuse my tea stains, even when you wash it, it doesn't come out. But after the error with this one, and it was just too thick and not stable for a soda bottle on it. With these others, I just used a heavy craft interfacing and didn't use any batting on them whatsoever. And they actually turned out really well. They handle a little bit of spill when you're pouring your tea, but they still look really good. I actually like the crocheted edging a little better than the tatting, and it was faster too, if anybody's curious.
Can you zoom in on that? It's really pretty.
Oh, yeah, do you have a preference on which
On
one?
one of the, well, any of them really.
Okay, this is my favorite.
That's gorgeous.
So once I made the base circle, then I did a button stitch around the edge, which is what I worked into. And then instead of your foundation row, you just work into the buttonhole stitch and then set your edging up from that.
Can we see the back of that one?
It's very nice. How long did it take you to, as an expert, how long did it take you to do that?
That one and that one, that really it was only 1 or 2 quick passes around the edging, were probably about an hour and a half, 2 hours each, because I used a size 40 crochet thread, so it was really fine for the edging. That one, and tatting is not my fastest. This one you ended up making 2 passes and you had to line things up when you came around the outside edge. So that one actually took me 3 to 4. And then these 2, which are my favorites, crocheting is actually pretty fast for me, so they really didn't take much longer once you set your base row, and they were both about 2 hours each.
Nice.
Can you wash them?
Yes, I throw them in the washing machine and I dry them on low so they don't shrink.
So did you crochet in a circle around them after you started them, or how did
Yeah, I made the fabric circle and turned it right side out so everything's inside. Did the buttonhole stitch around the edge, and then I work the crochet directly into the buttonhole stitch in a circle so you don't have to worry about lining up any seams. Any other questions?
I really like that fabric pattern. The third up, we have Andrew with a vacuum exposure unit.
Let's see if I remember how to do this thing here. Hey, I did it. Cool. So, where to start on this project? This project started like a lot of great makery projects, which is, hey, I need to do something that takes years of practice to get good at. Let's try it in like 3 weeks and then just call it from there. So, this is one of the core components of what will become the exposure unit, and I'll talk about that towards the end so you guys know what the heck I'm actually working on. This is my first attempt at TIG welding aluminum. This is inch square bar that has a 16th inch wall thickness, or 16 gauge. They're pretty close to about the same. It's real fickle, and it rolls back, and if you don't get the heat real tight, real fast, it does that. So the surface tension of aluminum like pulls into a ball, and so when you butt up two pieces of metal together, they don't want to get together, they want to get the heck out of each other until you get the heat very precise and get both sides melted right and proper. So so I went back through that process, I don't know, maybe a half dozen times, getting better with practice and getting the right materials and things like that, and we can talk about TIG welding later perhaps. And I got a little bit better. It's still not good, but I'm gonna grind it out and re-weld it 2 or 3 times, and sooner or later it's good enough, right? So anyway, I also, just heads up, I'm terrible about taking photos of stuff I'm working on, especially if it like works. I'll take pictures of failures all the time because I'm like, what the heck's going on here, guys? But if it's working, I'm just like, whatever. Anyway, so after I got good enough, I ended up welding up this aluminum square frame here, which you can see. That aluminum square frame fits on top of this big metal box here. This is an old, it's called the lateral file cabinet. This was like 25 bucks from a guy on Craigslist. Like, you can't buy metal for that cheap. Like, it's a fantastic, if you have a project that's about yay, look for these things because they're awesome. Anyway, with this guy, I installed a couple switches on the front and some electrical on the back, and also added a wooden rib that I just epoxied into the middle of that thing. I expected that to fail, but so far it's been totally fine, and it has kind of rigidized the whole thing, kind of breaks down the larger sheets into smaller pieces. So on top of that rib and the edges goes this guy, which is my light board. What I'm doing is building an exposure unit for screen printing. So these are UV LEDs that will actually be doing the exposure of the emulsion onto the screen. It's just a piece of wood that's been painted white, and then I just ran those LEDs and basically soldered wire and hit them around the backside there. The 2 holes that you're seeing up front there are for 2 yellow bulbs that like bug bulbs basically, and those are like the wrong wavelength to expose the emulsion, so you can use them to like visually inspect what you're doing before you actually burn the screen. Most of this process happens in a dark room. It's not as photosensitive as traditional photography and stuff, but it still is something that you don't want to expose to normal lights. So on the backside of the guy, or this is actually the bottom technically, but it turned into the backside as I used the thing. I put a standard like computer power supply cable on the back, so I'll never have to replace the cable. Or never have to rewire the cable. I'll just have to replace it if I need to. And then there's also a light or an electric switch on the back, and that's gonna power the vacuum pump that's part of this component. Here's the light switches on the front. I don't know if you can tell or not, the one in the middle is slightly smaller than all the rest. So I went over to the home supply store and bought all three of the same thing. And at some point in the last month or two, they've had a manufacturer change. So these all have the same exact model number, and one of them's different. And so I went back and I bought up all of them that they had, and all of them were the different ones. I had to unhook this, unwire everything, resolder, because if those aren't matching, it's going to drive me crazy, even though I'll never really interact with this thing on a normal basis. But anyway. Yeah. So during all of that, I ordered some glass. This is 3/8 tempered glass over the top of that guy, which you can barely see because it's transparent. So I don't know why I took a picture of this. But anyway, after it's all cleaned up, I added a couple of plastic panels to the top and bottom of it, so that kind of cleans it up so you don't see all those rust marks and all that other grossness. This is the LEDs, and you can see those two bug lights in the bottom there. So that's kind of what it looks like in working order. The back corner, let me see if I actually have oh yeah, somehow I skipped this. So this is that same square frame that now it has a piece of rubber blanket stretched into it, and there's angle iron that's like pinching that rubber blanket down into that frame. And that's what's I'm gonna use to like pull the vacuum onto the glass there. And if you look in the right corner over here, you can see the vacuum hookup that I ended up using. It was basically just same deal. Go to the home store and buy a dozen fittings and hope that you can find one that works. The vacuum pump that I'm using is like an air conditioning vacuum pump. So it's going from a flare fitting to an NPT and then through several other things. There's a couple O-rings in there to hopefully try and keep things mostly sealed, but it works, which is great. Yeah, so that's the glass. There's that guy. This is a bit of a close-up of that plumbing nightmare that I had to go through in order to get there. So you can see the 2 or 3 different steps involved. The string you see on the left there, this breaks the vacuum suction so that you can kind of sort of like direct it, if that makes sense. What you end up doing is laying that piece of rope across the glass table, and then the rubber can't suck all the way down, and so it will pull vacuum across the entire thing. If you didn't have that rope in there, it would just find a little pocket in the corner, suck down, and then you'd just be sealed up against everything else. It also has a little bit of neon in it, so when you turn on the UV lights, it looks like Super Mario Kart, Rainbow Road. Yeah, that's the vibe I'm getting from it anyway. Anyway, so a screen printing frame gets shoved in there. You lay that rope over top like that. You close the lid, and it sucks, which is exactly what we were after. The only other thing I added was some hydraulic supports on the side so that it can get lifted up and down. And then I had to wire in a new outlet because there was no outlet in the back there. So anyway, these things are like, I don't know, $2 or $3 grand, and they're basically a light bulb in a box. This is still a substantial investment in time and effort, but I think I beat it by a fair amount. So we still haven't tested the overall exposure time. Those UV LEDs run like super hot, is the term they use for it. So I'm guessing that it will hopefully be something that we can actually kind of dial in, because the emulsion needs to be dialed in pretty precisely to get some of the more particular markings, like the smaller lines and stuff like that. So anyway, but that's not my job. That's my wife's job to figure all that out. So yeah, I'm all done.
What is the top made out of?
So it's like a rubber blanket that's specifically. It very much feels like an inner tube tire. I don't know if it actually is or not. And it's got they had lithium grease on it. I'm guessing because in shipment, if it gets hot and cold, it might stick together in a real bad way. So they covered it in lithium grease, and I'm still wiping it off. I don't know. I cleaned it like a dozen times, and it still isn't like 100%, but it's close enough. Anyway, so there's that. Any questions?
Is the rubber sheet from Screen Prints with Black Catalog basically?
It should be, but no, it's from eBay, which is just as good of an answer, really. It was like $90 for that rubber sheet, which is kind of, yeah, like it's pricey for what it is, but it's also cheap compared to, like, I don't know, this is the problem with like anything that's commercial where it's like I can make money off this. They're like, then it costs twice as much. So But I got that from eBay, and it works pretty well. The other option was to just use like a neoprene blanket, which I hear is a successful attempt, but this was kind of a bit more premium, and I figured with all the money I was saving, I could maybe splurge on that. So, yeah.
Why the vacuum?
So the process that you're going to do to expose that emulsion is you'll have a mask, which is a piece of like film with ink on it or something to block the UV from touching the emulsion. And that vacuum makes sure that the contact between the glass, the mask, and the emulsion is as tight as possible. And in addition to that, since it sucks down, you don't get any reflection back around anywhere where you might be otherwise. So and it's also black, which is nice, so it hopefully absorbs as much light as you can. And so you don't get that light bouncing around anywhere and exposing things that you don't want it to. We good? All right.
Thank you, Andrew. You should convince your wife to come in and show her art sometime. Yeah, okay. Next up, we have Mark, who has a 3-axis clock. Not even going to try to pronounce it.
Oh, I have no idea. So, just to show you how it operates real quick, it winds. There's 2 PETG springs in here, and it has a little thing to wind it up with, and it goes. And you tell what time it is by reading these things on the side. So it has hours on one side and minutes on the other. And the way, here, I'll just put it up here. There's a type of like a snail gear in here where as it works its way up, it's working its way out around the edge, and there's a little bit of a spring against it, and when it hits the top, it pops to the bottom. The other side works the same way, but because you have to synchronize the minutes and the hours, there's actually a little gear up here that you can lift, and then you can adjust. You can lift this and adjust the hour to get it in sync so that when it gets to the top, here I'll go ahead and show you how the retrograde thing works. Okay, what happened here? It should have, let's see, here it comes, and all right, that didn't do anything. Let's see. That's supposed to. We're trying again now. It doesn't. Oh, well, you saw it pop. It didn't. Oh, I see what happened here. Apparently in shipping, in my drive here, I managed to deflect this enough that it was rubbing on the side. Anyway, so you can put a metal spring in it. I don't know how accurate it is. Running off the 2 PETG springs, it'll only go for about 15 minutes. With the metal springs I could have put in there based on feeler gauge, it might go 45, but I don't know how long it would last for. Anyway.
How long did it take to print that?
I'm getting ready to get into all that. But 2 weeks, and that was, I work from home, so that meant I set the timer on my, I started the print, set the timer on my phone, went back to work, bing, okay, run upstairs, take the part off, start the next part, and everything had to be sliced. Here, let me just pass this around here.
That's great.
Would you say about deflecting it?
Yeah, just you bend it and it works better. Yeah. it likes torque. So this has to be very precise for it to even work. So what it came with were a pile of, you printed a jig, and the jig had to be printed in the same filament, with the same print settings, and the same nozzle as the part that you wanted to verify. So you'd start with a part based on how well a bearing fit on it, and then you can see in this one there's an inner and an outer bearing, and then you'd have a part in the center and you'd see how that fit. And within everything else, all right, let's see. So this is basically, I don't even think, is that focused well? Let's see here. So these things are broken down where you can see there's how many parts you're printing, what the color is, and then what the nozzle size is. So these are 0.4, and I was using a 0.25, which is also considered usable. And so there's about 140 or so parts. I think that includes the spindles. And to add more to this, if this will, here we go. For each of these prints, it's telling me which nozzle to use, what the layer height's supposed to be, what the outer perimeter is, and the infill, and whether to use print support or not. And so every single time I sliced a file, I had to see exactly what the settings were. So it was kind of an ordeal in that. And then getting back to all the jigs, the files are set up, they had a hierarchical directory structure where you'd start with one setting. It's like, okay, this part may have 3 pieces to it. So the first one would have a 0 and then like plus and minus 3 subdirectories. Then you go into one of those subdirectories based on how one jig fit. And then you might have another set of directories to go further. And you might have 27 STL files for one part, and you had to pick the right one that worked with how your printer is printing and how that filament is printing on your printer. So anyway, after 2 weeks, got it all printed. Anyway, it came out. It works, but you know, it's not perfect. Like I said, it's not a timekeeping piece. Let's see. Is there anything else worth mentioning about this?
So when you say 2 weeks, is that 2 weeks of figuring and calibrating and printing, or just 2 weeks of straight printing?
That's 2 weeks of straight printing. So I'd have an SD card on deck with the next half dozen prints ready. And I'd have them in subdirectories by color and by nozzle size, because I tried to group together everything by nozzle size first and then by color. And then after I went through all the colors at that nozzle size, then I'd change the nozzle and then go through the colors again. And of course, I'd miss something and have to go back and change the nozzle out and so forth. So yeah, there's a little bit of that involved. Yes?
I may have missed this detail. It may have varied by part, but what layer height were you printing at?
Oh, these are nothing crazy. Everything was either, I think, 0.15 and 2 for some things. Yeah, so the layer height, you can see right there. So some parts, well, there's a 1.2 in there. But for the most part, it was 1.5 and 0.12. Yeah, other than the one there that's at 0.12, I'm not sure how many. I think that's as low as it went. Yep, that's as low as it went. So they did recommend some filaments. I used all Prusament, and I was using the stock profile that came off the printer with the tweaks as the instructions had. And then you put it together in parts, and then at one point, this jig is actually, it runs in 2 modes. You take the same parts and bolt them into the side, and then out here, and that had to do with balancing the section in the center that's spinning. So you'd start with the first one with it narrow, get it balanced so that you could set it any place and it wouldn't spin, and then once the whole thing was there, you did the same deal again. And the more accurate balanced it is, the longer it'll run. Anything out of balance will, of course, take more energy because it'll run lopsided, I guess. But, I mean, the level of detail that the guy had in this was pretty amazing. So, I mean, he had a little holder for all the little pin sizes that would fit the exact number of pins that you made for each of those. He had little things to hold, if I can find it. It was in here earlier. But this is just to hold a piece that you had to run a screw through just to get the thread started to make it easier so you didn't put too much pressure on anything. So, I mean, like I said, mechanical engineer spent a year putting all that together, put a lot of effort into it. I was impressed enough that I went ahead and spent the money to buy and then spent the time to build. And now it's built, and I mentioned to some people, I had thought at one point this would make a great Christmas present, but no. Anyway, that's all I got. Yep.
Very nice. I'm excited to finally see that in person after seeing so many photos. Next up, we have Kevin with electro etching.
Hello, everyone. So I am refurbishing a 1935 lathe, and this is some of the tags that are on there. And they're kind of rough. Normally when you have a tag, the letters are raised up, and then you can paint, and then you can just kind of sand across the top to get back to shiny so that the letters will stand out. But for example, like in this corner where the screw had been, that was lifted up, and there would be no way to to sand across that. So I had this idea that I was going to try to remake these tags. And there's a variety of ways that you can do that. The most effective seems to use ferric chloride, and you put a mask on there, which is called a resist, and then wherever the resist is coating the surface, it won't be etched away, and everything else will. So I ordered some ferric chloride, but while I was waiting for it to come, I also read about using electricity to do the same thing. How do I get back out of here? So I just did a little test thing here. My kids recommended that we do, I think this is something with a Nintendo thing. From which?
It's the Triforce from Zelda.
Okay, Zelda, that's what I was trying to remember, yeah. So I got the Triforce here, and I made like a paper, and I cut it out, and then I used some spray paint to put on there. And then I used painter's tape around there. Just, you know, it's not real smooth. I was just trying to do this as a test to see how it would come out. So I put it in this electrical bath. You just take water, got a big salt container, turned it over for about 4 seconds to pour a bunch in. You put the positive side on your part, you put the negative on a sacrificial piece, and it's just salt water. And you can see it boiling there. I let it run for about an hour, and it wasn't doing a whole lot. The next day I came back and I put the two parts closer together, and they seemed like they did a lot better. I'm not sure why that made a difference, or maybe it was just the cumulative time. And this is what I came up with. Now, the painter's tape was not a good idea because it just got wet and started loosening up. So then I decided I would use packing tape. So as I was messing around with the packing tape, some of it got on my paint and pulled off part of the resist there, so that's where that is. But you can see there's some holes. It's not real good, but it's kind of cool. And this is just my first attempt. This bottom here where it got eaten out, I think is because it was sitting down in the bottom, and I think a bunch of metal debris went down to the bottom, and I think it kind of made a channel between here and the sacrificial piece, which then let a lot more electricity come down here and burn that part out. So if I do it again, I'm gonna suspend this off the base. But I think this is gonna be pretty cool, and it really only took a couple hours and a 12-volt battery charger and some salt water. So it's pretty low tech, and I thought it was pretty cool. Second thing is, at the office today, a rep brought by some cookies, and in the tradition, people have been bringing cookies. So I don't think I have enough for everybody, but I'm gonna set these back there if you'd like some cookies. Any questions?
What power supply do you use for that electrical?
I just did a 12-volt battery charger, and it has an automatic mode or a manual mode. I changed it to manual, and then it had 4 amps and 10 amps. And I started for 4 amps, and it didn't seem like it was doing much, so then I went up to 10 amps. And I kind of sat there and watched it. I was kind of worried it was on like burst into fire or something, but it never did.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I think he's right on that.
Okay, in the back?
Have you ever tried electroplating with that setup?
I haven't. I'd like to do that sometime. You know, I've seen like nickel plating. You can get a nickel solution, and you're supposed to do something like that and plate. Yeah, I'd love to play with that. I've just never done it.
I'm planning on working on that here soon as well.
Were you going to present it when it comes up, when you get it?
Maybe
All right, I'd like to see that.
you got a little more experience than I do.
No, this is all new to me.
Did you see Paul's project with that coin?
Mm-mm.
I don't remember what channel it was on in Mattermost. I think the electronics channel that he was doing something.
Cool.
Something with electricity and salt water.
He's doing, he's working on figuring out a good way to do a photoresist to do this. He did tell me there's apparently a tool here that does exactly that.
So a good way to do it, there's several different ways to get your resist on.
Yeah.
A good way is to just paint it with spray paint and then put it in a laser cutter and let your laser cutter burn off the paint everywhere you want there to be etching. Short of that, you can do like the just cutting out a stencil and spray painting of it, but that did not have real firm edges. Another thing that's commonly done, you see, is called press and peel, which is where you put this special compound into a photocopier, and as the ink gets on there, this material will release the ink, so you put it on top of your surface with heat, and then that ink will go down onto the metal, and that becomes your resist. But to me, it seems like that resist is not going to be very thick, and I'm not sure how effective it's going to be. So I don't currently have privileges to do the laser cutter. I haven't done through the class, but that would probably be the coolest thing to do, would be the laser cutter.
He mentioned you can cut vinyl and then stick that on and use it as a stencil.
Mm-hmm.
But what I was talking about, a tool that does that, there's, I think it's in arts and crafts, it's called an etch-o-matic, and you have an electrolyte, and you put your resist down, and then soak a pad on this thing in electrolyte, and you press it down for a couple seconds, and it etches it on.
Cool.
Yes. Yeah.
Machining too.
Any machining?
Yeah, it's not gonna get that deep. It's like a surface level kind of job, but it's.
I mean, I wanted it to be deep enough that I could put paint down and then sand it, because right now those other tags, the way I ended up doing is that I just painted them, and then I used a little tiny screwdriver to scratch off. So I'm not going to redo the tags, but I want there to be enough difference that the paint can be done and you can sand off the top. Anything else? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Very nice. Next up, we have Ori, who has a coin miner. What kind of coins? Oh, okay.
So I had a bunch of spare, these are Arduino Pro Minis, I think. I've got 8 of them on this board attached with, this is a little Wi-Fi microcontroller. And when I left the house, I'd set my phone to the same Wi-Fi and password as my house. So it's generating the Wi-Fi signal that's connecting this to the internet. And then the coins that these mine are it's Arduino coins. So it's a cryptocurrency that's designed for low power devices. You can't run it on anything high powered. They do all kinds of stuff to block you from doing that. You have to constantly take pictures of your setup to prove that you're not
using a emulator or doing anything like that. So it's just a fun project to kind of learn about how cryptocurrency mining works and how the algorithms work. And it's made to do on low power devices that don't use a lot of electricity. So yeah, eco-friendly. So in the on the dashboard for this, you can see it's not creating much. Well, let's see. So I've been running this for about a month now, and I think I'm up to about 50 cents worth of currency. So. Yeah, it's not doing much at all. But it was a really cool project to learn how these work, and they light up, and it's a lot of fun to watch them at night. So yeah, that's what I've been working on besides having a baby. Any questions?
So you said you're taking pictures of your setup. So are you sending that to like a regulating body for
Yeah.
cryptocurrency?
Yeah, well, it's just for this particular coin. It's called Duino coin because it's meant to run on Arduinos, and so you have to like every now and then they'll flag your account if you're really steady, and you've got to write your name on a piece of paper, take a picture of your setup and how you've got it organized. So I did this on 2 different breadboards because I've got the pins for I've got a 90 degree angle pin on the bottom. And that's actually the power is going in there. And then the clock and the data pin are on the back. And I'm using the power rails for actually, this rail is doing the power. And then the rail in the back here where the blue and yellow wires are going across, that's actually the data and the clock pin there on the bottom. So I was going to solder it all to actual perf board, but I just kind of like the way this looks. It's, it's a fun little project.
So did they contact you at first, or did you start contacting them?
I found them on, I was looking for Arduino projects, and I think I just ran across it on Thingiverse. Somebody actually built a rig where they'd put together, they'd like done theirs like stacked up. So it's a lot of it in the project is just kind of like, how creative or interesting can you make your setup.
Are they monitoring how much you make?
It's all through there. I mean, they're the regulating body for it, so they've got their own website.
Do you actually make that? I don't know anything about that.
So you can take that currency and trade it on any of the crypto platforms. I mean, like, you could buy 50 cents worth of whatever else you want to buy and stake it however you want to. But I'm keeping all of it in their little ecosystem for now.
Same number as Snickers bar.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. I think the vending machines will start taking crypto eventually.
What's the power to crypto ratio?
I have not done the math on. I've actually meant to hook this up and see how many milliamps I'm drawing. I don't know if I'm net positive on power consumption yet, but I probably will eventually do the math for that. Thanks.
Maybe in 10 years you can buy us all a Snickers bar.
Whoa.
Last but not least, we have Toby, who has brought his head in a bag again.
Carrying it in a trash bag looks a little morbid, I know, but that's all right. I've printed a few more pieces, and I figured I'd show off the other pieces. So it's still a work in progress, but it's getting there. So it's getting bigger and bigger. So top pieces are actually 2.5 hours a piece, but I did mess up my printer. I had had one support still left on the build plate that I didn't clean off, which is about the size of maybe half a pinky nail. And when the build plate went all the way down to home, since that's 1/20th of a millimeter, it actually cracked the LCD. So the thing about resin printing is, number one, you need to make sure everything's cleaned out of the vat and everything's cleaned off the build plate before it homes. Otherwise, it's $150 for my part, which come in Saturday. So hopefully that'll take care of it. But again, hopefully after I get this head in the bag finished, I'll be able to learn how to do liquid makeup and stuff like that effects.
What was the inspiration?
Well, it was actually a joke, and my jokes usually end up 11 o'clock at Waffle House. We make a stupid comment, and I've done a couple of different comments. One ended up cosplaying Paul Bearer from WWE. Another one's going to be the Penguin from Batman, so that one's done all except for the nose I haven't tried on. I've got the Jeremy Brown, he was a member here, but he basically has done the prosthetic nose for me out of 3D printing pieces and parts. So hopefully when Fanboy Expo comes around in June, July, whatever it is, I'll be actually there cosplaying the Penguin from Batman. And that's going to be one thing. But the joke was, I've played around with Alginate and made a handprint here one time where you could actually see my fingerprints and everything on the plaster cast. So the joke was I was going to go ahead and 3D print my head or make a cast of it or whatever and learn how to do prosthetics and liquid latex just because I've seen it done for movie making and things like that. And I'm like, I love to tinker. I'd like to know how to do that and actually play it. And if I had a mannequin head of my own, I could apply it onto that mannequin. And if it takes like 4 to 6 hours to do this one little piece, I could be like, oh crap, it's midnight. I got to be at work at 8 in the morning. Take it off. Oops, I tore it. It's bad. Now I can't work on it. So I figured, well, if I built a mannequin head of my own, I could apply it on that and then transfer it to me, and I don't have as many screw ups. But the other joke is, just for the first test, I'm going to do just a thin layer of my face so I can do the whole Scooby-Doo effect. So that was the joke. So that's where this come from. And I was like, if I could have had someone just apply the alginate, I could have had that done in a plaster cast in probably 10 minutes for the alginate and maybe 30 minutes of the plaster cast and been done. But I figured I've got a 3D printer, why not use it? And that way I can say, yeah, I'm an idiot. I went ahead and scanned my own head, 3D printed my own head, and made it life size. And as you can see with this one, this is in 3 different layers. So the top part's not glued on or anything yet. And of course, I had another buddy that said that I ought to do like the Steve Martin Man with 2 Brains and make it a screw top head. I was like, he's like, but you could use it as a popcorn bowl then. And I'm like, no, let's not go there. But I guess it would be a good, could be a nifty Halloween prop too.
You need
Just,
to
you
get
know,
a better holder though, like some macrame or something, and make it look like so you could swing it around.
I should have bowling ball
Maybe do something like they did on the Haunted Mansion with the Hatbox Ghost or something. I don't know. Yes.
When it comes to doing the liquid prosthetic on there, are you concerned about it sticking to the plastic?
I'm going to clear coat it with automotive clear coat, and hopefully that will work. I also found out that if you take any 3D printed or basically any printed and you clear coat it, then you can go ahead and make a silicone mold off of that, and you can go ahead and do whatever you want to with the silicone mold. So, I mean, you could actually invert it by making a silicone mold as well. And I've actually got a example of that with a 3D printed prod out there as well. Yes, sir.
What did you use for the stand? What did you use the
I actually have a 3D scanner from Creality, which is also a 3D printing company. I know we're not supposed to name drop or anything like that, but I actually just bought a commercial scanner. So it was less than $1,000. Yes.
When you say you're clear coating it, is that gonna take out any of the fine detail?
It will take a little bit of it out, yeah, but it'll put a thin layer of on top of it. But as if I was to clear coat the alginate hand that I did like that, you wouldn't be able to feel the fingerprints and things like that, of course. But it would be good enough to get it as close to my skin facial as possible. Any other questions? And yes, I know this is stupid, but you know, people like to tinker, and I figured, well, why not? And I have actually 3D printed little 4-inch figures of all my brothers, sisters, nieces, nephews, and all like that, and give it to them as a Christmas. This is very expensive. Well, I mean, they've got my little figure still in Arkansas, so I mean, a little 4-inch figure. So they've got that. I think it was like 12 figures or 14 figures or so for all of us. But yeah, it's basically a 3D tintype when you think of it. All right.
That's all the shares we have for tonight. So on the calendar, we have some upcoming classes. Tomorrow night, we have a woodworking 101 at 7. There's still tickets. And we also have a MIG welding 101 at 6:30, and there's still tickets for that. So one ticket. Get your phones out right now and buy that ticket. On the 31st, which is a Thursday, there's a new member onboarding. It's not on the calendar yet, but it will be soon. If you're new, if you want to know more about Knox Makers and hear Isaac and I talk for an hour, and eat donuts, you can come here and we'll talk about Knox Makers and how awesome making stuff is. And then on Saturday, April 2nd, there's a scrap metal art class. Are you teaching that too? And there's a few tickets left for that too. That should be exciting. Does everyone get to make their own art, or is it? That sounds super fun. I had no idea. Maybe I will sign up. So don't buy all the tickets.
No prior experience necessary.
No prior experience. No, you don't need to be authorized in that area. Is it open to the public?
It is.
It's open to the public even. So come make scrap metal art. And then one announcement. Right now we have KUB on the schedule to come look at putting up some lights outside by the gate or near the building. The schedule, meaning in the next 10 days. So don't lock the gate. There's a little note on it saying don't lock it, but also if you come across that note, don't email everyone and call me at 3 a.m. and be like, the gate, can't lock the gate. Just leave it open and hopefully we'll get some more lighting outside. That's all I got tonight. If you're new and you want a tour, find me or someone with a red name tag and we'll be glad to show you around. Otherwise, go make cool things.